Hey everyone, welcome to Resilience Unravelled. This podcast is a result of my fascination with subjects like resilience, accountability, burnout, life fulfillment and other life and work-based performance issues, as well as many of the other obsessions I bump into in my life. I spend my time working with highly successful teams, people and organisations, and this podcast introduces their remarkable stories and expertise, as well as my own synthesis of the key issues, strategies, tips, tools and resources to thrive in life. If you find this podcast useful, why not go over to our site qedod.com. If you'd like some resources on how to manage and beat burnout, head to qedod.com/burnout2019 for some goodies. Stay tuned to the end to find out details of how to order a free ebook. Enjoy the podcast. So today I'm talking to Cara Landau and about a subject I'm A, passionate about, B, really fascinated by in terms of its effects, but know actually relatively little about it. So, well, why not talk to an expert dietitian? And the person we've got to talk to is Cara Landau from Uplift Foods. So hi, Cara.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
And I notice immediately by your accent, you don't sound as if you're in the UK.
No, I was visiting a couple of weeks ago, but I am an Australian who is based in New York City, so woman of the globe.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a story around that as well. How on earth did you end up in New York? Which sounds great.
Yeah, I did not intend to end up here. I came across about 7 years ago on an exchange program in my master's studies, and I was meant to come for 3 months, but life had another plan for me, and 7 years later I am definitely home here.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
With pleasure. So I'm an Australian registered dietitian and accredited nutritionist, and my background has very much been focused around prebiotics as the fuel for probiotics. Yeah. And at that time when I moved overseas, I actually decided to write a book. I'd gone through a very big breakup and I was feeling very stressed. And as a dietitian already, I knew that food had to play some sort of role in our mental well-being, but I just had never understood what. And so I ended up becoming an author at that point and writing a book called The Clean Separation that discovered this emerging field of what's called now psychobiotics, which is the connection between gut healthy nutrients and our mood. And so from there, I guess I've created a very specialized area where I have been sharing predominantly with the media or helping in the food industry to create healthier products and to educate consumers and people on how they can nourish their gut health to support their mood. And that has led on to what now is the company that I founded a couple of years ago called Uplift Food, which is a gut health and mood focused company. And we've got a couple of products and ebooks, which we can talk about later.
Fantastic. And so this link between food and mood, you're basically saying that that's something that's proven, or is it an idea or a hypothesis? Where is thinking on that?
Oh, there is so much science behind it. I think it started off more sort of at a surface area looking at particular types of eating patterns that were more supportive of preventing depression and anxiety, and things like the Mediterranean diet, eating more healthy fats, eating less refined sugars, less refined carbohydrates, were all showing to have positive effects. But then as the science keeps digging deeper and deeper and deeper, they're starting to find that our gut and our brain are connected, and there's signaling pathways that could lead to this reduction in stress to our brain. And so it is really interesting, the science of psychobiotics continuing to grow, but in addition, the further research on which particular nutrients and, on that more broader scale are going to be beneficial or detrimental to our mental health.
So what you're saying is that the the way your gut works affects directly mood, stress, depression, your ability
Yes.
to handle the day to day. So what how do you get a bad gut, as it were?
Yeah. So I guess just to try to simplify it down, when we already have probiotics inside our gut from when we are born,
Right.
but when we don't feed them, that diversity of probiotics kind of dies away. And so, or you get imbalances of the bad to good bacteria that you don't want because you haven't been feeding the good bacteria. And so what happens is that if we were to eat prebiotics, which is the fuel for probiotics, you consume the prebiotics, the probiotics in our gut naturally ferment those, and the byproducts are able to reduce the stress signals to our brain. And so it creates this anti-inflammatory environment. And what we do know is that depression and anxiety are directly connected to having inflammation in the body. So hopefully that breaks it down a bit about, one of the very key mechanisms of how nourishing our gut with the nutrients it needs, they can then send these anti-inflammatory signals rather than the opposite being the inflammatory signals that can affect our mood.
That makes sense. But there's a lot of talk, certainly in the UK, about probiotics as having less of an effect because they're sort of supposedly these things contained in little pots of yogurts and such like. But is that what you mean by probiotics?
So when I talk about prebiotics, like PRE, that's talking about like fermentable fibers or what's called resistant starches, and I'm more than happy to give some suggestions of what sort of foods they would be found in. When we talk about the issue with probiotics, and maybe it's worth touching on some of the things you just mentioned. So something like yogurt, that can have probiotics in it to ferment the actual yogurt, but it doesn't mean that it has a probiotic benefit to us as the host, because there may not be enough probiotics in there at levels that actually pass through our acidic stomach to make their way to our gut to then add to the diversity of probiotics that we already have inside of us. And so what's really beneficial here is if we can go for that preventative measure of consuming the prebiotics and feeding what we already have inside of us. And, we all have different microbiomes. We all have different makeups of bacteria that we need to keep in balance. And by fueling what we already have, our body is usually pretty smart at being able to then maintain that balance and that diversity so that we can reap the benefit.
I see. So the strategy is to feed the prebiotics, so it builds your own ability to create.
Yeah, correct. For us to eat the prebiotics, and they will feed the probiotics we already have inside of us.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that you mentioned the Mediterranean diet. That was a lot about fruits and vegetables and high fiber stuff and whole grain and such like. I mean, do you find prebiotics within sort of common vegetables and fruits, or are there better sources?
So you do find them inside fruits and vegetables and legumes, as an example, which are all found in the Mediterranean diet. But what's interesting is that a lot of the commonly consumed fruits and vegetables are not very dense sources. So the things that we eat today, such as a tomato and lettuce and carrots, broccoli, they're not the richest sources. Whereas the types of vegetables, as an example, that are very rich in prebiotics are things like chicory root, dandelion greens, asparagus and onion are two that are a little bit more commonly consumed, garlic as well. But as you can see, that they're not foods that I would say most people eat every day regularly in the doses that would be required to reap the benefit. You do have some of the more I believe, quite interesting ingredients that are very rich in prebiotics are those that are rich in what you call resistant starches. Okay. So resistant starches, as the name suggests, are starches that resist digestion by us and make their way to our gut so that the probiotics can ferment them. So acting very similarly to a fiber.
Yes.
And they can be found naturally in, again, some random foods like unripe bananas, which you can find in a flour form these days as green banana flour. But, just if you have a banana before it becomes super yellow, that's one way of getting them in. But interestingly, when you cook and then cool a grain or a potato, we actually can develop resistant starch. So if someone likes to roast their potatoes and then they let them cool, and then you can actually reheat them after that. You just have to let them cool once. We develop resistant starch, and therefore your body doesn't digest all the carbohydrates per se from that food. It acts more like a fiber, and it selectively feeds the good gut bacteria. So very powerful and beneficial.
Interesting. So I notice in some of the on your site, it talks a little bit about the scientific experts, and you make reference to Dr. Michael Mosley, who wrote The Clever Gut Diet.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about this idea, and sort of very much reinforcing what you're saying. It's this idea of having things which are fermenting, which is important, and the resistant starch. So you talked about green bananas. How else can we find a good source of prebiotics?
So there's green bananas. There's also, like I mentioned, if you cook and then cool your pasta or rice or potatoes. Potatoes are actually one of the densest sources once you cook and cool them. And then also some of the vegetables that I mentioned. I know over in the UK, at least I'm pretty sure, you can get ingredients like lupini beans. So lupin, which is a legume, that can be they're really dense in soluble prebiotic fibers. So the other type of prebiotics. And so I definitely recommend them. There's also, but most legumes and lentils you can get a little bit. So I would recommend trying to find ways to incorporate them into your diet for a number of reasons. And then if someone likes oats, if you have them uncooked, so making something like overnight oats or a bircher muesli style recipe rather than heating and cooking your oats, raw oats actually have a very high resistant starch percentage. So they're another very interesting way to get them in. And if you pair them with something like kefir, and you make, an oats with some kefir, which has good types of probiotics that actually do make their way to your gut, that can be a really nourishing breakfast option, as an example.
Yes. Now, I do notice on your site a good, healthy prebiotic fiber protein pancake recipe. Now, as a fan of pancakes, how on earth is that? I'm already thinking about having that for tomorrow. So how does something like that help us?
Yeah. Well, it's giving you a blend of all the nutrients that would, one, keep you satisfied, but two, nourish your gut. So that recipe would have been incorporating the Daily Uplifter, which was a product that I personally formulated to try to give people this Jerusalem artichoke ground down into a powder, and there is a bit of green banana flour in there. However, if you heat, you need to make sure that you don't heat it on too high a heat, because the resistant starches found inside green banana flours do get destroyed if you heat things too high. So I would recommend to your listeners that if they see recipes for banana bread made with green banana flour, that's going to have been baked for too long at too high a temperature, and that would not necessarily give you the gut health benefits anymore. So just be mindful. But yeah, that's what the pancakes would have incorporated to include the gut health benefits.
Because I think some of the time when people are talking about healthy diet, it becomes a bit. You look at the food and it looks a bit worthy. Dare I say dull? Dare I say tasteless? But actually, some of the things that I'm looking at on your site, they look pretty exciting, really.
Oh, I mean, I've been a foodie my entire life. There is no way that I would be suggesting to people that they eat bland food. I think there's a way of getting these gut healthy nutrients in very enjoyable forms. So that's what I try to share.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you created a product called the Daily Uplifter. Tell me about the motivation for creating that and how you went about that.
Yeah, so I had been online with a social profile called the Prebiotic Dietitian for many years, and I had been sharing all these recipes that you mentioned. If someone goes onto my Instagram, they can scroll back for years and see all these very nice tasting recipes that I had created. And I kept getting feedback from my audience saying, Cara, this sounds amazing, but I'm never going to order all those different specialty ingredients. And I guess I just felt that, you know, it needed to be done. Someone needed to create a product that was easy to use and took into consideration people's current dietary habits and lifestyle patterns, that they're, you know, in a rush and then a lot of the time, and not trying to ignore what people are actually doing. I feel like a lot of the time when I was, 10 years ago when I was in a private practice and I was making personalized recommendations, and a lot of the time you're making recommendations based on, you know, the best option for that nutrient, but it's not really taking into consideration what the way the person is already eating. And I really felt that I wanted to, you know, there's people making smoothies, there's people that want to be able to have pancakes, there's people that want to be able to bake something and then take it with them, you know, in their lunch and be able to have a healthier snack and not buy something mid-afternoon. And so I guess that's where the motivation came to create that particular product. But knowing dietary patterns, it's actually led to me also currently Uplift Food is in the process of developing a snack range of sort of grab and go gut health focused cookies, because I felt that, again, there was an opportunity or biscuits in the UK, and instead of people, you know, feeling like they either have, you know, this, as you said, bland sort of healthy foods, or they could have something very unhealthy, I felt like there was a way of actually giving a functional benefit. So there's been a lot of focus on trying to understand the way people eat and move and all of that, and then create products that can support them get these gut health prebiotics into their diet.
So there must be two elements to the strategy of building a food product. I'm sorry, I do find this fascinating, so do forgive me for digging a bit deeper here, but there must be the two things. It must have enough goodness or enough of the elements to make it good for you. Then it obviously needs to taste good, and it needs to look good as well. I mean, some of that's marketing, but yeah, I have a smoothie every morning, which is amazingly good for you, but you know, tastes terrible, and I dread it, drinking it every single morning. It's that thing. I mean, when I was a kid, we used to have this concept my mother introduced me to called spring medicine, which is the thing that you drink because it was good for you. And the better it was for you, the worse it tasted. And and it must be quite tricky, sort of getting in all these different elements. I mean, where do you start? Do you start with the nutritional side, or you start with the taste side? How does the process unfold to create?
It is seriously challenging. You've hit the nail on the head there. Particularly with the snack product, I did find the powder was a little bit easier. But having said that, as a dietitian, nutrition was going to be number one, and ingredient integrity. So a lot of the time, what you'll see nowadays is that if there's, you know, gut health is per se trending, and so there are a lot of products that just throw in something like a chicory root fiber, which is a type of inulin, which is a type of prebiotic, and they just put in this one type, and it's, you know, a relatively cheap ingredient, and they make claims that it's a prebiotic, but, you know, as a whole, the whole product is not necessarily gut healthy. It could still be high in other sugars, it could be high in other refined carbohydrates, it could be just relatively nutrient poor, but contain that one beneficial nutrient. And so, you know, at Uplift Food, I was adamant on providing, you know, valuable nutrients in levels that there was enough science to support there being a benefit. So even if Uplift Food personally didn't run the clinical study, there were clinical studies to back, you know, particular prebiotics or particular probiotics and giving in a dose that has that positive, what you call bifidogenic effect, so causing the probiotics to proliferate, and then ensuring that sort of some of, I guess, my own personal nutritional and ingredient criteria, like removing any artificial flavors and artificial sweeteners and things like that, that may have a negative effect on the gut, were also not included. So yeah, nutrition and ingredients are the number one pillar at Uplift Food, but I have certainly, I know that consumer purchasing habits is based on taste. So that has 100% had to come into it. And as an example, the cookie product has been in development for over 1.5 years now. So it has certainly tested this entrepreneur's patience and resilience. We have had many failed trials at the production plant, but we've also seen, you know, a lot of glimmers of hope that show that we're very close to being able to bring these to consumers. So that's that never say die attitude that has to come through.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you mentioned resilience there very quickly. Is there a link between resilience and the sort of food you're eating?
Well, I would say that, you know, some of you, I believe I feel more resilient when my mental health is in check. You know, like if I'm feeling overwhelmed constantly and constantly stressed, then that ability to keep your mind frame in the position to be resilient when you get all those no's or those harder days, you know, you don't have the same strength, or I believe I personally don't. So I have certainly seen and I do express that, especially over the last few years when there's been many challenging periods, I have very much said I credit the fact that I have so many prebiotics in my diet, because there's a difference between feeling, I believe maybe when you become that in tune with your body, you can feel when there's a physiological down versus when it is just, you know, objectively something bad is happening. I need to be able to manage this. Whereas you can sort of feel when your hormones are taking over, or when sometimes you can't explain, but you feel flat. And I do believe that when, you know, since I have been nourishing my gut health, those physiological changes have resulted in me having a stronger and more, you know, more ability to challenge these things and to have a more positive mindset.
Yes. I mean, there's no doubt that, I mean, we talk about needing energy to have the resilience to manage your thoughts and to manage your stress. And if you're, and I know we talk a lot in the UK now about this link between, as you said earlier, between energy, mental health, and you know, the fact that actually a lot of more enlightened doctors who are meeting people who are stressed and anxious and depressed, or the first thing is they're checking their diet before they put them onto antidepressants, because actually a lot can be achieved with good diet.
Yes, definitely. And I'm very happy to hear that some of the more modern doctors are going down that route, the functional practitioners. It's wonderful to see.
So if you're to, I mean, there's a lot of supplements out there. Is getting prebiotics from the sorts of things that you're talking about, do you need to use those sort of food, designed foods or designed supplements? Because actually there's not enough natural prebiotic that in sort of the average sort of diet that we have. Is that the idea of creating these or prebiotic dense foods?
Yeah, look, I think ideally people were consuming all naturally occurring prebiotics in, you know, the foods that they're eating. But I think it's sort of the reality is that they're not so readily available in the commonly consumed foods these days. And unless someone is going to make a strategic effort to plan out their diet to ensure that they are eating enough of the asparagus, enough of the onion, enough of the legumes, you know, every day, it is likely that there would be a deficiency in this particular nutrient. And so you've got over in the US, you've got, or I guess the international groups, so the Global Prebiotic Association and the International Scientific Group for Probiotics and Prebiotics, ISAP, they all give a recommendation that they would say that it's likely that we would recommend that you consume some form of prebiotic supplement to support your diet. So, I don't say that as Cara Landau, founder of Uplift Food. I say that as a registered dietitian looking at some of the other professional bodies and what they're recommending, and being realistic about what people are actually eating.
Yes. I find this absolutely fascinating. And I'm also fascinated the fact you're an entrepreneur and such like, and I'm sure you could have a different podcast just talking about that, but let's put that to one side for a minute. I just find this whole subject so interesting. So you're basically telling me I can eat myself happier and eat myself healthier.
I definitely think so.
Really?
I genuinely believe that.
It is quite a radical idea, because the trouble is that most food is designed to be gorgeous and actually quite bad for us, isn't it?
Well, if people are consuming on the number one element being taste, then it and they continue to, that's where their dollars get spent, because I think that, it's one thing for someone to say, I want to eat healthier. It's another thing for them to actually put their money where their mouth is and to purchase those healthier products. And, there's this balance, because a lot of the time these truly healthier products and foods and even just, natural organic ingredients are more expensive. And there's this balance between, what people can afford and what is available. But I guess, there's ways of blending in some specialty functional foods with other whole foods and creating an enjoyable and nourishing eating pattern that, is not just a diet, but it's something that you can stick with for life.
Yes. So you can use it as a supplement rather than as a replacement. So you get the balance between
correct.
All sides, because eating is a very sociable thing, isn't it? And sometimes, so for example, tomorrow night or the night after, as I'm going to some sort of murder mystery evening, but it's a dinner party, and a lot of our social conventions are, around food, aren't they? And it's not always the best food, but food is part of our social environment, isn't it? So having something like this in the background is actually quite interesting to sort of rebuild or sort of plug the gaps, really.
Yeah, and I think there is always a way. Like, I can say, as someone who travels a lot for work and is not always with my kitchen and having complete control over food, I think that's fine. I think there is definitely a way of, once you've got the knowledge of what you need to be consuming, then you can start to make the right choices based on the available options you have in front of you. And you can plan a little bit, like having some of these functional products or supplements around you. But they're called supplements for a reason. They are meant to supplement your diet. They're not, a lot of the time I think people, they almost start to live off supplements, and that's certainly not what's being advocated here. It's meant to be on the side to help boost the nutrition.
So if people would like to find out more about you and your products and your approach and actually some really interesting recipes, I've already bookmarked the site and sent it over to my wife, who is in charge of all things healthy and nutritious in this household. How can people get hold of you?
Yeah, so every day I'm sharing my knowledge over on Instagram at the prebiotic dietitian, but otherwise upliftfood.com is the website where there's a lot of information. And I guess for UK or international listeners that are not in America and they wanted to try the Daily Uplifter, that can be ordered via a site, evitamins.com, who ships globally for us. Yeah.
And I'm having a little look at 5-ingredient prebiotic yogurt bulk. Oh, blimey, no, I have to stop this now.
Super simple to make.
So just to reinforce that upliftfood.com, which is certainly the site I've been having a look at and thoroughly enjoying and seeing all sorts of, to be honest with you, looking, you're talking about food being more expensive, but it's pretty comparable to the the things that we buy in some of the major shops. So it sounds like you've cracked the pricing down, so that's great.
Doing my best.
And just for my own benefit, what was the name of the Instagram site again?
The Prebiotic Dietitian.
Brilliant. Cara, it's been a joy to spend time with you today. I really do appreciate your time with us, and I've learned a lot. And I think that's, for my mind, it's really sort of cleared up this idea about where to focus our attention in terms of thinking about food and mental health. So thank you very much for that.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You take care. Thanks for listening today. You can go to our site qedod.com/podcasts and subscribe to hear other titles in our series. Or you can contact us at info@qedod.com to hear and find out more about tough love, leadership, accountability, resilience and burnout. You can go to our site qedod.com/burnout2019 to hear and get access to a load of resources to help you manage and fight burnout. And you can go to qedod.com/free ebook to hear more about the fundamentals of resilience. Until the next episode, keep on thriving.